Alita for having a meltdown in front of my parents over me not saying I have a half-brother. Alita for having a meltdown in front of my parents over me not saying I have a half-brother. I17M had a meltdown in front of my parents the other night. And they're angry because of the things I said. Things are rough and I need some advice now. To BG. My dad lost his first wife, half-brother's mom when half-brother was 5. He and my mom met 2 years later and a year after they met I came along. My dad had my half-brother in therapy and he and my mom went to family therapy with my half-brother too. But it never helped him accept that dad remarry or that I existed. I was 10 when he moved out and the years before that. He said so many times I wasn't his brother and he said he was an only child. My parents would call him my brother and younger me followed their lead and he would yell at me. And sometimes he'd throw stuff at me for saying he was my brother. He told me he hated me, he didn't want me, and he was never going to accept me. The last 2 years he lived with us he said I was gross because I wasn't his mom's kid. And he couldn't believe dad betrayed him and his mom by marrying my mom and having me. He said we were the worst thing dad ever did and how he couldn't wait to be away from me. By the time he moved out I had started to wake up to the real situation and understood that I was never going to have a relationship with him. I think even at 10 I knew that kind of hatred doesn't just go away. And he truly hated me and wished I had never existed. He wasn't afraid to fight with dad either about me. Dad would correct him whenever half-brother would say we weren't siblings. Dad would say that we're brothers through him and half-brother would say how that would never be true and the only siblings that would matter is if dad had more kids or adopted more kids with his mom. Any kids with random women weren't his siblings ever. My parents never stopped saying we were brothers. Just brothers, not even half. I'd say half for a while after he left and my parents corrected me and said we're not half anything. We're brothers. But instead of going back to brother I stopped saying I had a sibling at all. My parents didn't notice at first and then around 2 years ago. They started to pick up on it and they called me on it. I tried telling them that he was never going to say I was his brother. And I didn't want to make things awkward by saying I had a half-brother who hates me and will never have anything to do with me. They told me I can't know that for certain and they said it's still a lie when I say I have no siblings. They're worse with me than I remember them being with him. Maybe that's because mom pulls me on it while she didn't with my half-brother. Because he was nasty to her whenever she tried to parent him. But it gets me so fucking depressed when they pile on me about it. And I tried to talk to them calmly about it in the past and how they need to accept I don't have a relationship with him and it's easier not to mention him. But they are so pushy. And then the other night, I snapped and had a meltdown. And I told them how fucking much it sucks to have them on my case. And how they made my young life hell by telling me over and over we were brothers. When they knew it would get him in my face and yelling at me. And reminding me of how disgusting he thought I was. I told them he only had to deal with dad correcting them while I had both. And it was way more often than it was with him. When he's the one who refuses to have anything to do with me. I told them I accepted the way things are and I needed them to because they were making me go insane. And I was starting to hate them because I can't do a fucking thing about the way things are with him but they act like me saying brother will magic him back. I told them I was tired of it. I wanted them to stop and leave me to hell alone. I was both yelling and crying but it was more like anger crying and not. It was a whole thing. They got so mad at me for the stuff I said, especially about them.